really rather moving. So I'm going to start with that and then carry on with Thanksgiving. As we've been taught to pray, eternal Spirit, life giver, pain bearer, love maker, source of all that is and shall be, Father and Mother of us all, loving God in whom is heaven, the hallowing of your name echo through the universe, the way of your justice be followed by all peoples of the world. Your heavenly will be done by all created beings. Your commonwealth of peace and freedom sustain our hope and come on earth. With the bread we need for today, feed us. In the hurts we absorb from one another, strengthen us. In times of temptation and test, strengthen us. From trials too great to endure, spare us. From the grip of all that is evil, free us. For your reign in the glory of the
Bishop Jeff, somehow you've been muted there. Sorry, you
has it come back now?
No,
When did it? Was it? Had it got through most of the prayer?
I think you had got through most of the prayer. It was from the things that are hurtful to us. Spare us. I may not have exactly the right words.
Yes. So anyway, in times of temptation, strengthen us. For trials too great to endure, spare us. From the grip of all that is evil, free us. For you reign in the glory of the power that is love, now and forever. Amen. And so let us give thanks to the eternal Spirit, to the universe, to this amazing Creator God, for the magnificent and amazing planet, the only one we know of with life and the only one that is our home, a planet of such abundant beauty and wonder. Life, which is a miracle in itself. And so may we do all that we can to preserve and keep it. And we give thanks to all of you for the work that you do in caring for God's wonderful world. Amen.
Amen. And what a beautiful opening prayer. Thank you so much, Bishop. Bosco Juma is from Kenya, and he is going to bring us the second opening prayer. And I'm going to request that everybody who is not speaking to please just mute yourselves, because otherwise it's very disruptive to our speakers. And if our co-hosts can just spot anybody who has forgotten to mute themselves, and please just mute them, but not everybody. So Bosco Juma, please, would you like to bring us the second opening prayer?
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I'm just trying to ensure that I am clear enough or audible enough before I start. But if
Yes.
I'm clear enough,
we can hear you.
Thank you. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Heavenly Father, we come before you this beautiful morning. We present ourselves before you. We creatures, people who manage our ecosystem. We thank you, Lord, for the wonderful world you have given us. We thank you for the leadership that you have granted unto us. And we thank you for this moment where we gather to be able to share knowledge, experience, and lessons regarding our earth, regarding our ecosystem, and also regarding the roles that you, our Heavenly Father, have bestowed upon us regarding our ecosystem and the planet which you have been able to prepare for us so that we can manage. In a special way, Father, we want to pray for each and every individual who is going to be with us during this session. We pray that, God, that you may give us wisdom, you may give us understanding, you may give us open mind to be able to learn, to share, and also in our important way, to be able to practice what we are going to share, and also to be able to appreciate further to those who are not with us during this important meeting. Dear Lord, we dedicate our lives, we dedicate our ecosystem, we dedicate our organizations, we dedicate our leaders to your able hands, that you and only you, Lord, you may give us the wisdom, you may give us the ability to be able to do what is right, to be able to do justice to our ecosystem, to do justice to our environment, and holistically to do justice to our planet. We thank you, Lord, because you are the creator, you are the one who deserves all the praise. And it's in Jesus' name, the name that's above all names, that I pray and believe in. Amen.
Amen. And that was such a heartfelt prayer, Bosco. Thank you so much for that. I felt that as well. That's a beautiful way to open our regional interfaith dialogue. And before I introduce our first speaker to you, I'd like to just give you a little bit of a context about our regional interfaith dialogue. So these regional interfaith dialogues have been based on the 6 thematic areas identified by SAFC at the policy conference in Johannesburg in November last year. So we have had regional interfaith dialogues involving a wide range of people of different faiths. We've had intergenerational discussions. We've had people from all over Southern Africa. We've even had presenters from America, from overseas. We've had really deep discussions around animal justice, climate change, food security and climate change, energy and climate change, consumerism and waste, land and water justice. And this, our 6th and final one, is about planetary boundaries and biodiversity loss. If you would like to read a little bit more about the research and about the sharings that were presented at our policy conference in November last year, please do visit our website because it's all there. And what we've been doing also is we have been taking the resolutions that were produced from our policy conference in Johannesburg, and we have been we've been presenting those to our regional interfaith dialogue gatherings, and we have been inviting people to just question whether these still hold true a year later. Does your faith still agree with this? And that is what the draft resolution is about. And a little bit later, we'll be introducing a poll to see whether you feel that you still agree with the statements that were made. So without further ado, I'd like to invite Bishop Jeff Davies to set the context for us. And what we've invited Bishop Jeff to do is to just tell us what is happening in the world around planetary boundaries and biodiversity loss. What is it that we're dealing with? So as I mentioned earlier, Bishop Jeff is the beloved co-founder of SAFC, along with his wife, Kate. And it's always hard to know what to leave out when introducing Bishop Jeff. So we also fondly refer to Bishop Jeff as the Green Bishop. And he's enjoyed a full and impressive career in ministry, mostly in Africa, where he spent time, including time as rector of Cork Bay, director of mission within the Church of the Province of Southern Africa, suffragan bishop of St. John's, and finally, the inaugural diocesan bishop of Umzimvubu. So after retiring from that diocese in 2003, he initiated the Southern African Faith Communities Environment Institute along with Kate. And SAFC is a multi-faith environment non-governmental organization, so it's for environmental advocacy. And it was inaugurated by Nobel Peace Prize winner Wangari Maathai in July 2005 with the vision, People of Faith Caring for Living Earth. So SAFC promotes caring for people and planet as a moral issue which should be firmly on the agenda of every faith community. For his efforts in 2016, Bishop Jeff was awarded the Langton Award for Community Service by the Archbishop of Canterbury, and I quote, for his far-sighted commitment to environmental concerns. Bishop Jeff, you've made an amazing difference in our world and in our country, and it is such an honor to welcome you as the context setter, the conversation starter for our 6th Regional Interfaith Dialogue. Welcome, the floor is yours. There you are. You wanting to share your screen? Do you have what you need to do that?
Not yet.
Not yet, okay.
Does that...
Now you should be able to, Bishop Jeff.
I'm looking for the little icon at the moment.
So if you just scroll your cursor down to the bottom of your screen, you'll see the green little share screen sign at the bottom of your screen, and then you'll be able to click on that when you need to.
I clicked on, oh, this is always annoying, isn't it?
No, that's okay.
Kate, I'm trying to, this WhatsApp. I'm looking for my Zoom thing. What's the Zoom meeting? That's.
You don't need your Zoom meeting. So all you need to do is just scroll down to the bottom of your screen, and you'll see a little.
I clicked on the wrong one. There was another, and now.
Good morning, Kate.
Do we join again? Oh, there we are. There we are. Now the bottom of the screen, share screen. There we are. Share screen. Ah. There we are. Thank you. Wonderful that I continue to have Kate, who's able to help me in these crises as we have all along. And so then we want full screen somewhere. Is that? No, that's not there. No,
Bishop Jeff, if you just scroll up and to the top and start to where that little icon is at the top with an arrow and a picture of a screen, and you should be able, it's just above the word insert. And if you click that, you'll start the slideshow.
Sorry.
Yeah.
It's here now. Just, yeah. Sorry, Barry, just say that again, please.
Not a problem. If you scroll up your screen, you see the word insert next to home. And then just above that is a little picture of a screen with an arrow on top of it. And if you click on that arrow, it will start your slideshow.
Say that again. Okay. Next to home, insert.
It's above
And
insert.
then?
It's just above that word is that little that one. Yes. Click that. There you go. Magic.
Wow. Isn't that wonderful? Thank you, Kate, and thank you for getting us there. And then I wanted to thank you, Reverend Berry, for this crucially important dialogue. And I look forward to hearing faith responses. But the very first thing I want us to understand is how crucially important it is that we are aware of being part of nature. We are not separate from nature. We're totally dependent on the well-being of this planet. And so let us just be reminded of that. We are dependent on clean water, clean air, forests, wetlands, grasslands, estuaries, marine systems. But what are we doing to our common home? Just be reminded. And so we need to recognize that we are part of the rest of life, whereas for so long, and maybe particularly among the Abrahamic faiths, we have allowed man, and I use that word clearly, to be at the top of this triangle, dominating the rest of life, instead of realizing that we are one with the rest of life, that all of life are fellow subjects. We are interconnected and earth-centered. And I think it was the the European philosophers in the Enlightenment who led us astray, saying we should dominate nature, but we are part of nature and must live in harmony with the rest of nature. I think people in Africa, and particularly indigenous people, have a far greater understanding of this. Now scientists and futurists are showing how we have to live within the planet. But let us be reminded first that in the Genesis, in the opening chapter of the Bible, in the creation story, God said, let us make humankind in our image. And then it says, have dominion over every living thing that moves upon the earth. And I think this is one of the most misused words, because we've taken that to dominate instead of in being given dominion, that we care for and look after that which is of which we are part. But it does then say, be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth and subdue it. But it says that for all of life. And then finally it says, I've given you every plant yielding seed. And so initially we were vegetarians, and I think that's important. And then after the flood, God said, I'm establishing my covenant with you and your descendants after you, and with every living creature that is with you. And now the scientists have brought to our attention that we have overshot the planetary boundaries. And you will see in that diagram the center with the essential areas of responsibility, but you will see in the orange areas that we have seriously overshot the safe living with the rest of life. So biodiversity loss, climate change, land conversion, nitrogen and phosphorus overload are in a serious position. Nature's dangerous decline, we are now facing unprecedented species extinction. And I think the second important point we must know is the importance of biodiversity, that life evolved through biodiversity. In May last year, the United Nations Environment Programme issued its report, its IPBES report, and it said that current global responses are insufficient, that transformational changes are needed to restore and protect nature, and that it was assessing that at least 1 million species are threatened with extinction. And I want us to be conscious that extinction means the end. We can never bring back life again. And I think I'd like to say that extinction is the greatest of sins, to bring another species into extinction. So, dear friends, we are in a serious, precarious position. And if we continue our present lifestyle, we are threatening the future of life as we know it on this planet, our only home. And so why is this happening? We are taught that in the Bible, I think, and this we share with Jews, that God called for justice. Let justice roll down like waters, and righteousness like an everlasting stream. We're called for equity. Gather as much as you need, we read when the Israelites were led out from Egypt. And that we are taught that a sustainable future is possible, but only if we establish ecological and socio-economic justice. And the injustices economically, and this is an old slide, but the position has got even worse, that 1% of the world's income, they now own more than 50%. And this goes totally against God's intention. When we started SAPSI, people said, well, you know, why are you talking about the environment? Isn't our job to get people to heaven? And the position now, we can say, is dramatically changing. Pope Francis, in his excellent encyclical Laudato Si, has said that we must care for the natural environment, and that if you care for it, you will love it. Now, just this last month, the UN General Secretary has pointed out how essential it is that we change our ways and reduce carbon emissions. And Greta Thunberg has issued another powerful video calling on all people to reduce. And David Attenborough has an excellent film and book with lots of sound suggestions for the future of life. The second reason why we are not changing is our current economic system. We worship money instead of worshiping God. Our lives are dominated by money. We have to acknowledge it. Instead of seeing money as a resource, not the resource. A report has just come out showing that the 35 top private banks have invested 2.7 trillion in fossil fuels since the Paris Agreement was adopted 5 years ago, and that these investments are increasing every year. So this is now where faith communities are so important. We need to affirm the ethical principles all faiths uphold of justice and equity and compassion and love, and apply those to the way we deal with our finances, so that it is known that life is not about money, but about life. Life on this incredible, magnificent, beautiful planet. And our goal should be our well-being and that of the planet's well-being, not money. That's not why we came onto this world. This is the most challenging and exciting and rewarding ministry we can all undertake to care for one another and God's creation. And so I look forward to hearing the approach of some of our faith communities and leaders today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Bishop Jeff, and that certainly does start the conversation for us. Really interesting how things have evolved in our thinking over time, and isn't it true that when we know better, we can do better? And let's just continue to trust ourselves to do better and really just hold that picture in our minds. Thank you so much for sharing that, because you've really taken the brunt of, as you say, people saying to you, well, you know, it's our job to get people into heaven, not to care for the earth. So you've taken the brunt of that on behalf of all of us. And I thank you. I think the earth must thank you and we must all thank you. Blessings. Thank you so much. So moving on to our panelists, and it's going to be really interesting to see what our panelists bring to the table in terms of what does your faith say about planetary boundaries and biodiversity loss. I'm going to first invite Mr. Bosco Juma to the platform. So Bosco Juma is a conservationist. He's the executive director of Big Ship organization registered in Kenya. And he is an environmental rights champion in Kenya, especially on mangrove systems, climate change, and blue economy. He has over 10 years experience in community-based mangrove ecosystems conservation and is passionate on community social eco-enterprise development. He has more knowledge on the culturally diverse coastline communities of Kenya, with much interest as well on empowerment of youth and women. Bosco, it is an honor and a pleasure to welcome you, and your time starts now. Please do take the floor.
Thank you very much for that elaborate introduction, and also for this opportunity to share my experience and to also be in a platform with my fellow leaders, faith leaders, and actors in the environmental programs. I'm also very honored to meet Bishop Green. It is a great honor to meet you, sir. And I'm really pleasure to be part of, to share a panel with you, and also to meet the great team of SAFSEI, having been one of the beneficiaries of the SAFSEI programs here in Kenya. First, when I got an opportunity to give us a talk regarding the regional interfaith dialogue, was to have done this before, I remember on 5th of December, but unfortunately that couldn't happen. And it's God's plan that I got this opportunity now. So what I might say regarding this conversation, it actually touches the heart of our faith. And me being a Catholic and also a member of young leadership programs here in Kenya, this opportunity wouldn't have come at a better time than now. Maybe to just bring ourselves to speed to some of the things that we look at in our setup as Christians and also as people of faith with our ecosystem. I am a Catholic. I am in the Roman Catholic Church, and first I will not want to delve further without giving a perspective of what our faith says or the practices of the Catholic Church regarding our environment. I am sure and aware that some of us, or most of us, have heard about the Laudato Si, and it is a very good point of starting this conversation, because for me, I look at it as one of the governance systems of the church towards environmental protection and conservation. In the Catholic Church, the leadership always, especially the Pope or the leader of the church, writes policies regarding different issues that are important in regard to our church and also the world in general. And I must say that this is the first bishop, or the first pope, or rather, to have come up with a policy specifically on the environment. Pope Francis has actually done a very great deal to our planet by coming up with the policy, the encyclical regarding environment, which is the first encyclical on environment in the Catholic Church. That notwithstanding, we are people of the book, and the Bible is actually, of course, also the Quran. But as a Catholic, we are very much into what the Bible tells us about our ecosystem and about our faith and environment. And I must say, the Catholic Church is very ready to collaborate regarding lessons or topics or preaching in matters of
Sorry,
environment.
Bosco, please just hold on a moment. We have some serious interference. Somebody really needs to switch off their microphone, please, so we can hear our speaker. Thank you. Please go ahead.
Sorry, Perry.
Yes.
Hello, I just switched off the mic. Can I just ask Bosco to speak just closer to the mic? Because you go faint quite for long periods of time.
Am I clear now?
Yes, that's much better. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for highlighting that, and I'll ensure to be as audible as possible. As I was saying, it's regard to the teachings of the church, and I started by touching a little bit on the Laudato Si and the governance regarding the inception of Laudato Si and Pope Francis, and what it means to we as Catholic and citizen of the world in general. And of course, the Bible itself. I want to appreciate what it entails regarding our ecosystem and protection of our environment. And the topic, planetary boundary and biodiversity laws. As I had said, this conversation will come at a better time, because we are actually 5 years. The Laudato Si is also 5 years, and we are celebrating 5 years of Paris Agreement. And right now, we are expecting next year to get into the year of climate action. And I must say, much has not been done since Paris Agreement. So this conversation is actually setting pace for further conversation regarding the same. Now, as far as our faith is concerned, one thing that when we were growing up, we were being told is that cleanliness is next to godliness. And that is the basic that we always hear regarding how environment could be as important in regards to pursuing godliness. And as far as this conversation is concerned, I look at our faith as an integral point towards protection of the biodiversity. I want to reverse to the conversation that was just shared by the bishop regarding ecocentrism and egocentrism. It's a concept that I believe has not really been captured much, especially by most of our leaders. And it is the baseline towards understanding where we come from with our environment. And initially, the environment was there without people, without anything. Then environment with plants and animals. Then there came a generation where we had environment and people. And that's where we are living in. And environment and people is where now we have the competition between egocentrism and ecocentrism. These are actually how we perceive our ecosystem. Is it from the people point of view or from the environment point of view? And the egocentrism, I always like to refer it mostly with our current capitalistic system. We people who are managing the ecosystem have the capitalistic perception regarding what we are supposed to be doing. And I also want to pick this into two parts. As people of faith, the Genesis have really captured a lot on why we should protect our ecosystem. Bishop talked about Genesis 1-2, which have really been overused regarding we are dominion, regarding dominion of our earth. And I think that one has really given us more of the capitalistic strength as a human person who are living with, now we are living the generation of people and environment. But in the Genesis 2:5, we get a point where, when I look at it, the Genesis 2:5 is where we are being introduced towards environment and management. And I think this is where we start to look at how, which word are we using when we are referring to we, people of faith, and managing our ecosystem. And it reads, Genesis 2:5, and every King James Version, the King James Version, and every plant of the field before it was in the earth, every plant of the field before it was in the earth, and every herb of the field before it grew. For the Lord God had not caused it to rain upon the earth, and there was not a man to till the ground. I'll come again. These are the generation of heavens and the earth. When you come from forth, the Lord God made the earth and the heavens. Okay, the Genesis 2:4, it ends with the statement, the Lord God made the earth and the heavens. And then 5 is start by saying, and every plant of the field before it was in the earth. It means before plant were in the earth and before every herb were the grew. The Lord had not caused it to rain upon the earth. The Lord had not allowed the trees to grow. The herb to be before the boundaries were actually set up. The Lord had not done that, had not caused it to happen that way, because there was no man to till the ground. Now, the New King James Version talks about tilling the ground, but in other version it talks about managing the ground. So it gives me a more in-depth understanding on the Genesis and our perception and what God, the roles that God has given us, more to manage. Dominion is more of political term, if you allow me to use that, but management is more of leadership. We have failed in our leadership in terms of managing our ecosystem, and that's why we are having a lot of our boundary loss. I wanted to pick that so that we understand whatever we don't manage, we lose it. If we can't manage our ecosystem, as we are not, then we are losing it. And science is telling us that we are now at 2 degrees centigrade. We are losing our ecosystem because of management. Having talked about that, and about our faith and the planetary, I wish to give some few examples regarding our faith and how it touches on environment. Right now, most of the most iconic person in the Catholic Church is St. Francis of Assisi, as far as environment is concerned, for those who understand the story of St. Francis of Assisi, because he is actually the patron of ecology, and whoever was studying ecology in the Catholic Church, or basically matters of ecology, he has been actually the most sorted after or referred after a saint in matters of environment. Back in my country, Kenya, and biodiversity laws. In my experience, in my 10 years experience, working in the mangrove ecosystem and understanding our climate change and what is happening, we are seeing a lot of dwindling water sources and wetlands. Our wetlands are actually dwindling, and we are having a lot of conflict in regards to water as a resource. We are looking at a situation where we have land use. When we talk about management, our land use is actually not being managed in the right way. We're seeing a lot of encroachment here in Mombasa. In fact, one of the most recent advocacy that we are actually pursuing is how companies, I come from the island, the Mombasa Island in Kenya, and Mombasa being a logistic state or county, we see a lot of entrepreneurs who are chasing for land space to put yards and to put logistic company because of the strategic position of the county. This one in detriment of our ecosystem. So land use actually being a big issue, including encroachment for housing. Mangrove ecosystem, Mombasa has only one big forest, which is the mangrove, and it's one of the biggest forests actually in the coastal region of Kenya. And encroachment has really, human population and poor planning is really one of the major issues. This one is also with the rising sea level, but here in Kenya, we have seen rising lakes. The Great Rift Valley, we are having water rises, which are coming to even meters and getting into areas that there never used to be water before. How can we explain this? How can we explain this? Poor management and also the planetary boundary and the loss of the biodiversity is actually due to our poor management. What does our faith tell us about managing our ecosystem? One very important part I want to bring with our ecosystem, especially the area that I'm so much passionate about, which is protection of the mangrove ecosystem. Mombasa Island, having given you the picture, has lost 80% of its mangrove over the since the 1960s up to 2009. That's based on our research. You realize our biodiversity loss has actually been at an unprecedented pace. So our faith, from where I come from, or from the way how I'm looking at it, has a big role to play. The Catholic Church is trying to make sure we through the Laudato Si and other programs, that have programs that are caring for our homes, caring for our common home. And this common home, I'm talking about homes in plural, because it starts right in our households, right in our communities. How can we inspire creation within our communities? And I've seen our Catholic Church is really, really, really pursuing that through our community groups, through our youth group programs. And that one is something that we want to see being emulated. One very important component when I was doing advocacy in terms of the destruction of the marine ecosystem, that's when I realized that the Catholic Church, when I was trying, we had a court case because of the county government and dumping site. We were trying to do a lot of awareness through the media, the mainstream media, print media. But the most important people in leadership could not hear this until when I was told that our bishop, our archbishop, is actually sitting in a committee. He's chairing a committee where the governor of the county actually sits. Then I realized all this advocacy, I should just take it to our bishop. If he understands, then he'll make the governor understand. And I did just that. And at that time, during the helm of those campaigns, also through SAFSEI, I remember sharing with Zainab Adam about this, and trying to understand. I made it even a topic in some of our sessions regarding that. And I'm trying to say the power that the church has towards influencing for better management of our ecosystem. Because through that, I realized that there's an even shorter way of doing environmental justice, just by going to the church. And this governance system is what I'm bringing back to the Bible, to St. Francis, who is the icon of whom I also personally really, really embrace with regard to environmental conservation. So as I end this presentation, I want to end it by saying that how we are going to inspire our ecosystem will be based on how leaders right from the grassroots, from our county, from the national, from our regional, and all the way to the national platform, international platforms. How best can we come with management systems that are going to ensure that we have these biodiversities for the posterity and for the longevity? I'll end it by saying that management of our ecosystem is as important as managing our own bodies and managing our own families, our own nuclear families. And I want to appreciate SAFSEI for this opportunity to be able to join this great team in matters of talking about our creation of the earth. One very last practical activity that we do within our ecosystem, we have methods that are taken in school. We have programs in our parishes, in our community, as I had said, and in this, we even put it into our prayers. And this is a very important thing that if we can pick it up as people of faith, then we'll be able to achieve results, starting from our children. What are we teaching our children as people of faith? What are we telling them in terms of managing the ecosystem? In our diocese, in our parishes, even our priests, you'll be surprised that some are not very much keen into how our ecological justice is being done. How are we going to celebrate our creation by managing it better? So without any further ado, I want to thank you, SAFSEI, for this opportunity to talk about how our communities are approaching matters of creation and how we are putting our relationship between the public and the private and the church to ensure that together we are having a common home. Thank you very much for listening.
Bosco, thank you so much for that. And although you did fade a little bit from time to time, and obviously I think your connection might be a little unstable, I think that the message that we really take home with us is how important our teaching is, not only in the church, but also the messages that we give people in the church, the language we use, but also with our children, and how we have such an opportunity and a responsibility to really make those connections for them. Thank you so much, Bosco. And the work that you're doing in the mangroves is amazing. And yeah, we thank you for that. And also, of course, Bosco is one of our fleet members, a fleet participant from a couple of years back, Faith Leader Environmental Advocacy Training with SAFSEI. And it's just wonderful to see that work that you have been doing, Bosco. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
So I feel like we actually need to hear the voice of a woman now. And I'm very, very proud to introduce you to the lady that I have not met before. Her name is Dr. Gladys Kalema Zikusoka, and I hope that I have said that correctly. Dr. Gladys, in the legacy of the late Diane Fossey, Dr. Gladys has become one of the leading conservationists and scientists working to save the critically endangered mountain gorillas of East Africa. She is the founder and chief executive officer of Conservation Through Public Health, a 16-year-old nonprofit organization that promotes conservation by improving the quality of life of people and wildlife to enable them to coexist in and around protected areas in Africa. Dr. Gladys hails from Uganda. She's also the star of a BBC documentary called, what was it, Dr. Gladys? What was it? A wildlife vet from Africa. And Dr. Gladys became an Ashoka Fellow in 2007. So I'm going to ask you to mute, please, if you are not speaking. So, Nangwale, can you please mute yourself? Dr. Gladys became an Ashoka Fellow in 2007 for merging Uganda's wildlife management and rural public health programs to create common resources for both people and animals. So it is such a joy to welcome you. Thank you so much for stepping in at pretty short notice and just making yourself available to bring us some of your extensive experience and expertise and learning. Dr. Gladys, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you so much for inviting me to speak. It seemed to be a very interesting topic, and I felt that I'd very much like to contribute and learn, and I've learned a lot just by listening to the past two presentations. So I'm going to share my screen. I think this is the one. Okay. Can you see my screen?
We can indeed. Thank you, Dr. Gladys.
Yes, thank you so much for inviting me. I think there's someone who wants to enter.
I've sorted that out.
Okay. And I was really excited to be able to present today. I'm a Christian, and I would say that I'm from the Anglican Church, Protestant, and also born again, but I've grown up in a Christian family, and I've always been in wildlife since I was little. I started off by having pets at home, and then setting up the wildlife club in the school that I was at, in Uganda, Chibuli Secondary, and later on set up the first veterinary department in Uganda Wildlife Authority, and then eventually we set up conservation through public health with my husband, who I met in between, finishing at Wildlife Authority and starting the NGO. And both my husband and I are strong Christians. We come from Christian families. And sometimes in the communities that we speak to, when it's very difficult, they'll tell you, yeah, but God created the Garden of Eden and we need to look after our animals. Even when you're because conservation is always a very complicated topic when you're presenting it to communities. And so it's really good when sometimes religion can make community members appreciate and want to protect the wildlife more. So I'm just going to talk about my journey, and I've worked with mountain gorillas for a large part of my life. I would say all my working life, I've been working with mountain gorillas, and starting off when I was a vet student in University of London, Royal Vet College, University of London. And when I first came to Bwindi, I was amazed at the very hard edge there was between the community and the park, because once you get to Bwindi, you find that it's very, very hard. It used to be a forest reserve before it became a national park. And when it was a forest reserve, people could go in and cut trees sustainably. But when it became a national park, they're not allowed to go in anymore. But however, once you habituate animals, make them used to human presence, they sometimes go back to where they used to go because they've lost their fear of humans. And so as much as habitat loss is the biggest threat to gorillas all over Africa, and poaching, not so much poaching in Uganda, poaching for gorillas, but poaching for other species, and gorillas accidentally get caught in snares or get speared, which unfortunately happened during the pandemic. But in other countries in Africa, where people see that if you eat a gorilla, you can become as strong as a gorilla, the numbers are also going down because of bushmeat. We had a scabies skin disease outbreak in the mountain gorillas, where this baby gorilla died, and the rest only recovered with treatment, and was traced to people living around the park who have very little health care. They put out, gorillas went to eat their banana plants. Unfortunately, they don't only eat the fruit, but they eat the plant as well. They really like the shoots and stems, so they can destroy a whole banana plantation. And people, of course, got very upset, because this is their livelihood, and this is where they get their source of food. So they put out scarecrows with dirty clothing, because they don't necessarily have a lot of clean clothing themselves. But this is to chase away gorillas, baboons, and other wildlife. And this is how we think the group got scabies. They were not touched by humans, but they touched clothing which had infected mites and spread through the group. And so all these things are interrelated, and these are all the things that we are addressing when we set up conservation through public health, where we promote biodiversity conservation by enabling people to coexist with gorillas and other wildlife through improving animal health, community health, and alternative livelihoods on around protected areas in Africa and wildlife-rich habitats. Our vision is for people to live in harmony with wildlife and local communities acting as stewards of their environment. So we have 3 integrated programs: wildlife conservation, community health, and alternative livelihoods. And within the wildlife conservation, there's a big focus on wildlife health and habitat conservation, trying to reduce deforestation and as well as preventing cross-species zoonotic disease transmission. In community health, we strengthen existing community health workers that's being supported by Ministry of Health as volunteers, and teach them to also promote conservation, because they're able to reach everybody's home that they're responsible for. And they're able not only to take across public health messages, but also important conservation messages. And we also work with community animal health workers, because some of the communities we work with care more about their livestock than themselves, their cattle than themselves. So we work with community animal health workers and also teach them to promote conservation. And we also started an alternative livelihood, Gorilla Conservation Coffee, where we support coffee farmers bordering the park, giving them a better price for good coffee and reducing their need to enter the forest to poach. So this is a typical scenario around Windy, although it's improving now since we started our programs 15 years ago. And you're no longer having people having children every year who they can't support, who they can't look after. And in the process, you can't break the poverty cycle. And they continue having to depend on the forest to survive, and the children will continue suffering. So we really promote hygiene and sanitation, because that's when you can prevent diseases in people and diseases in wildlife. And we also get people to refer people who are sick. And we added COVID-19 recently, but we started off with looking at tuberculosis, scabies, HIV, diarrheal diseases. They refer them to the nearest health center. We promote voluntary family planning. It's probably a controversial issue on this forum, but family planning is seen more of a way of stewarding your resources in a responsible manner. You know, when you have a family like this, which has, 10 children, when we started out, people were having 10 children per family. They said half of them are for chasing wildlife from the garden and half of them are for going to school. And those, of course, who have to chase wildlife from the garden will never have a future, because they'll never be able to go to school and they'll never be able to break the poverty cycle. And you end up having teenage pregnancies and everything. The family will continue to suffer. Domestic violence, drinking, and all these things. And so that's why I got convinced to get involved in family planning a few years after we started conservation through public health, when I realized that it was really linked to our whole mission and vision to promote coexistence between people, wildlife, and livestock. We also promote nutrition and sustainable agriculture, and people get to report homes visited by gorillas, and so that in that way those homes can be attended to quickly, working with the Human Gorilla Conflict Team, who are community volunteers trained by Uganda Wildlife Authority to herd gorillas back to the park. There's a strengthened awareness now on zoonotic disease with a focus on COVID-19. And they also talk to people about not going into the park to poach or collect firewood, especially now when there's no tourism, or it is drastically reduced because of the pandemic. So these are the kind of people we work with. Luckily, half of them are men and half are women. I know Reverend Berry said it's good to talk about the gender issues, but we're very fortunate that because our model looks at conservation and public health, we're able to engage men and women equally, which is very, very important, because all of them affect those sectors in the same way. And generally, women will not need the support of their husbands in whatever they do. And through this work, we're able to do that. We basically we found that through our approach, women are more involved in conservation and natural resource management, and men are more involved in healthcare and family planning, because it has to be a joint decision. And this is the local hospital that we're working with. And these are volunteers who are promoting both health and conservation. They're both health and conservation workers. And then this lady is giving family planning injections at her home, because through a partnership with Family Health International, we found that the most popular contraceptive was injection. And normally we try and make that the husband also accepts, he should agree to it, so that it's a family decision. And in this process, the family planning is higher here than other parts of Uganda, although it started lower than other parts of Uganda. So we're pleased about that. Then when we come to COVID-19, what's COVID-19? So I don't want to go too much into this because you all probably know it. You've been hearing it so much, but really it originated from bats, and it's just one of the other bat coronaviruses, except that this time around it's more severe than the others, which have happened in the past. SARS, which happened in Southeast Asia, affecting some countries in Southeast Asia, but didn't jump to across the continent to other countries. The civet cat, the intermediate host was the civet cat. Then there was MERS, which happened in the Middle East, and the intermediate host was a camel. And then SARS-CoV-2, which is the one that's causing COVID-19. The intermediate host hasn't yet been found. Maybe it's a pangolin, but that's another animal threatened by extinction. The Wuhan wet leg market is where the source is supposed to have started from. And it's a terrible condition for not only wild animals, but also domestic animals. Because those people who have visited it say it's a very scary. Animals are in very tiny cages, you know, chickens, bats, all kinds of species, and they're all next to each other. And the wild animals have been got from nature and brought into such conditions that are completely unnatural to them. And this makes them stressed, and it's more likely for the virus to spread from them to other species and to people. And that's where it's suspected it came from. And most likely it came from the Wuhan wet live market, and that's where the first cases were found. And over 70 million people have been affected to date, and over 1.6 million deaths. It's scary. Every time I give a presentation, I have to update this part because we're just hoping the pandemic we had wanted to have ended quickly, but it's just continuing. In Uganda, we're getting more cases as well. And although we're lucky in Africa, it's much less than the rest of the world, but still we know those people, and the hospitals are very few beds. So already the hospitals are overwhelmed, although we have, you know, we have about 25,000 cases in Uganda and maybe over 220 deaths. And so just going back to non-human primates, which I've been working with for most of my all my working life actually, the human common flu viruses have affected the wildlife. There's human metapneumovirus affecting gorillas, rhino C virus affecting chimps, respiratory syncytial virus affecting chimps and gorillas, human coronavirus outbreak. There was another coronavirus strain in West Africa, in Ivory Coast in 2016. Chimpanzees got sick, but it was mild, and the local community also had the same virus. So it wasn't as severe as SARS-CoV-2 causing COVID-19, but it caused some mild symptoms, and it came from people to chimpanzees in Ivory Coast, where they have a research site. And COVID has spread from people to captive animals, cats, dogs, tigers, lions, farmed mink. And I was quite a little bit horrified when over 500,000 mink were killed by the government in the Netherlands, because people, the keepers, spread COVID-19 to the mink. And then the mink, they were worried that the mink would become a source of infection for the people. So they euthanized 500,000 animals. And it is the people who made the animals sick. That to me was a big shock for me. And I feel that that's not the direction that God would like us. We shouldn't just be exterminating species like that. But I guess also farming mink so intensively is also part of the problem, because we were worried that it would jump back from the mink to the people. And there's even plans to euthanize another 15 million mink. It's weird, but I've heard about that as well. And then humans, great apes, and other old world primates like monkeys, baboons, like you have in South Africa, have similar protein receptors to humans, which means that the way that SARS-CoV-2 affects us is also the way that it can affect the great apes and other old world primates. So when you come to Bwindi, for those of you, I hope you get a chance to do so, you're told that you have to maintain a distance of 7 meters from the gorillas. And this is how the distance of 7 meters looks like. And you only have 8 people per gorilla group per day. And these tourists are actually visiting the gorillas at a safe distance. There's about 20 gorilla groups that can be visited in one day, but the tourists pay a lot of money. They pay $700 to visit these gorillas. And that money has significantly helped to lift people out of poverty, because some of it is shared with the local community. The park entry fee, they get jobs. 90% of the people employed are from the local community. They sell crafts. There are porters who carry tourist bags to the gorillas. The people selling crafts, food, accommodation. So all of this is very, very important. However, one issue that's happening is that the tourists have been getting too close. This research was done before the pandemic. We worked together with Ohio University and published a paper on this, where 60% of the time the tourists got too close to the gorillas, in spite of being told not to, and 40% of the time it's the gorillas who broke the rules because they were so used to seeing people. And some of them have grown up all their life seeing people, like the gorilla, which I showed in this previous slide. I've known him since he was little, operated his older sister when he was a baby, and he just thinks people are just like very good, and he'll even try and frighten them to see their reaction. So we had to get together with the NGOs in the area and the government, Uganda Wildlife Authority, which is in charge of managing the wildlife in Uganda. And they asked us to hold a workshop to upgrade the gorilla viewing rules, because tourists were now coming. Tourists were still coming at that time. They hadn't yet suspended tourism. And so we worked together with all these groups. CTPH worked with Mountain Gorilla Vet Project, International Gorilla Conservation Program, and Max Planck, and the Bwindi Community Hospital, where we sat down and got people to, first of all, take temperatures before you enter, not only if you're sick. Before, it used to be that if you're showing signs of flu, you're not allowed to trek. But later on, we added the thing of you have to take your temperature before you can even trek, because some people don't show signs of flu, but they're sick. And then wearing masks was the biggest thing that happened. Now you can't visit these gorillas without wearing masks. And now we're happy that the tourists who are breaking the rules are now demanding that they're not going to come to trap gorillas if they're going to make them sick. So this has been a big development, maybe a silver lining to the pandemic. And now the distance has actually increased from 7 to 10 meters, and we continue to donate infrared thermometers. So we're also giving the same kind of training to the human and gorilla conflict resolution teams of community volunteers who are, we gave masks and we gave posters, and they're carrying out the same training as well. And then we also started to work with village health and conservation teams focusing on COVID-19. We added COVID-19 on what we're already teaching them, and we provided them with posters with support from ACAS Foundation and Solidaridad. And these posters have the names of the wardens who they can call if gorillas come to their garden. So COVID-19 was an opportunity to get people to really improve on their hygiene and sanitation. This is the same poster in the local language. And we're pleased to tell you that the hand washing facilities have really gone up during the pandemic because people are worried about making each other sick. Because Uganda ran out of surgical masks when we started this training, we turned to Ride for a Woman, which is a husband and wife team that Evelyn and her husband Dennis, they started this social enterprise. They're from the local community to support the women and empower them in the community. So Ride for a Woman, we got them to produce masks for everybody because she was going to lay off all her staff. She said, I have to lay off all my staff. There are no tourists coming in. I can't keep them going. And I said, well, are you willing to make cloth masks? And she was. And so she was able to hire some of them and keep them going through the pandemic, which is very good. And so they're making masks for everybody, double layered masks with a filter, which is great, because in that way we're stopping people going into the forest to poach. However, in the absence of tourism, how do we ensure that the wildlife is protected? And this has been a big question mark all over Africa, not just in Uganda. And we are working with coffee farmers around the park, as I mentioned earlier, giving them a better price for good coffee. And a donation goes back to support the work of the NGO to improve community health in the same communities. And Entebbe Duty Free at the airport was our biggest buyer. Every week they were ordering coffee, but now they haven't ordered for 7 months. They placed the first order yesterday after the pandemic. So the pandemic hasn't ended, but since the pandemic began, 7 months they haven't been placing an order because the airport opened in beginning of October and traffic has started happening. And now they feel that they can place another order. So one thing that we're able to do during the pandemic, although most of the money that we used to buy the coffee from the farmers was coming from local tourism, local tourists, expatriates, but mainly the local tourism traffic, which now disappeared during the pandemic because tourism was suspended not only to protect people, but also to protect the great apes during the pandemic. This particular market disappeared, and we didn't know how to support these farmers and stop them going into the park to poach. And we're very happy to get in contact with Manny Robbins that was able then to become our first during the pandemic. We just exported the coffee to them abroad. And right now they've even placed their 5th order. Because whenever I give a talk and say that the one way you can support the gorillas is by buying gorilla conservation coffee, even if you're not able to come to see them, people buy the coffee because people feel that they want to continue to protect the wildlife, even during this dark crisis of the pandemic. However, we've had a setback. This particular gorilla, Rafiki, who was very, very famous and popular. Rafiki means friendly. He was killed by a poacher in June. And this poacher was going to hunt duiker and bush pig, as you can see from the photo. He wasn't going to hunt gorillas, but when he speared the bush pig, the gorilla had the sound. He charged because thought he was harming one of his, and the poacher said he killed the gorilla in self-defense, which is probably correct. I have to say that both the poacher and the gorilla had a point when this whole thing happened, but because Rafik is so friendly, he's grown up all his life seeing people, so we're wondering how could he attack? But when the bush pig squealed, I think that really freaked him out, and he ended up attacking. And this poacher came in because he was hungry. There's no money coming in from tourism, and he bought food. He hunted to feed his family and also to sell in the local market. He was given 11 years in jail, which is the longest anyone has ever got for killing a gorilla. It sent a strong message to everybody. When we went to check on that group 1 month later, I traveled with this porter. He was the first porter to get a job for 6 months, for 5 months since the pandemic had begun. And he even had a mask talking in memory of Rafiki. So the local community was very upset about what the poacher did. But however, we can't get away from the fact that they're poor and they're hungry and they're vulnerable. And this particular gorilla on the right, Ramutwe, had now taken over from his father, from the head of the group. And he was a gorilla that was a young male, hasn't even silvered yet, but he's the oldest in the whole group. And now he's taken over and the group is settling down. Every time I visit the group, they've settled down and they're doing better. So what we did is we decided to provide fast-growing seedlings to the homes that were suffering, and the most vulnerable homes, like the one of the poacher. And we actually met the poacher's wife last month. One of our donors, Task Trust, was doing a Christmas appeal with the Times newspaper, and the journalist wanted to meet the wife, so we met her, and it was very emotional because she's the poorest of the poor. Like the community is poor, but she's even poorer than all the rest. And so we visited her, and she was luckily enough, she was a beneficiary of the fast-growing seedlings that we provided to the local community. And within this space, the Batwa pygmies, who used to live in the park, but had to leave when it became a national park, they actually coexisted with the gorillas, because it's a taboo for a Batwa to look in the eye of a gorilla. They actually coexisted with the gorillas. And the porters, the reform poachers, all the people who are suffering because of the pandemic were included here, the Hugo and the Village Health and Conservation teams. But I would like to end my presentation on a bright note. We've had a baby boom in Uganda. We've had more gorillas being born in a short space of time than normal, which is great. We have 6 new infant gorillas born in the recent past, which is great. This time last year, we didn't have as many being born. And we don't know whether it's because tourists are not visiting and they're able to get on with it. But one thing we've seen from the pandemic is if you respect nature, then nature can bounce back. And we've developed a policy brief to promote responsible tourism all over Africa. And the 13 countries in Africa with grade 8s, 13 out of 21 countries with grade 8s, found at 33 sites. And so this policy brief is talking beyond that, as well as looking beyond tourism to sustain conservation and putting up a social media campaign. And these are all the different countries where grade 8s are found in Africa. The UNEP report emphasizes a lot of what I've been speaking about, but one thing is also about the issue of regulating or banning wildlife trade. And we feel as our NGO that we should remove the species that cause diseases or pandemics such as COVID-19 from the wildlife trade. To support our work, sign up for our e-newsletter, follow us on social media, can buy Gorilla Conservation Coffee. We actually have it also sold in South Africa through a distributor called Carito Cafe. And I'm actually writing a book about my experiences, and the literary agent who's helping me to write the book has just written a book called Discover Your Power Animal. She's more of a Buddhist. She's not a Christian. She's an Indian lady, so her religion is more towards Hindu Buddhism. And this book is about, saying each animal has some kind of spiritual connection. And this book is about that. You know, if you're, let's say, feeling depressed and you look at a robin, you can get some hope. And it's a very interesting book. It shows how gorillas are, I'd say, gorillas give you a sense of family. Like if you visit gorillas, you feel that you need to get back and mend the relationship with your family. So it's got all kinds of interesting things in there, and it's going to come out in January. And also donate to our website, and thank you very much. I'm sorry about the sound here, it's just come up at home.
Gladys, that was absolutely fascinating. And thank you so much for highlighting towards the end about the messages from nature. I feel that that is such an important part, especially of our African heritage. We have this amazing biodiversity. We have this wonderful connection to the earth. And our deepest ancient traditions all teach us about the messages in nature. And I'm so glad that you've highlighted that, as well as, of course, the importance of the collaborations that you've mentioned. And I find that really inspiring. And also looking at the way you've been able to be so adaptable. So for instance, in the absence of tourism, what did you need? What did you have? What were the resources that you were able to make use of and help the people to really maximize? And of course, that was first of all mask making, which was very creative, and then the coffee, very creative. And how wonderful that you've been able to identify these possibilities to assist the entire circle of life in Bwendi. And wow, I feel like we've just learned so much from you. What an absolute joy and an honor to have you here, just honoring the circle of life all the way through from every aspect. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I'm glad you enjoyed the presentation.
It was amazing. So thank you, Gladys, Dr. Gladys. Wow. I'm going to invite a Cape Town panelist to step forward now. Reverend Sean Cazette has worked for 12 years in government's natural resource management programs. He is a founder member of SATC, and he is also a current board member. He serves as a priest in the Anglican Diocese of Cape Town, and he was a recently appointed rector of the historic St. Paul's Anglican Church on Bree Street. Welcome, Sean Cazette. Reverend Sean, it is an absolute honor to welcome you, and the floor is yours. Reverend Sean, are you with us? I know we have a lot of people in the room today, so I didn't spot you. There you are.
Thanks. Can I share my presentation?
Yes, please do. Thank you so much, Reverend
Just
Sean.
1 second. Just making you a co-host. There you go.
Thank you. There we go. Well, thank you for the opportunity to present. Mine is a presentation on a Christian framework within which to talk about planetary boundaries. I think some of what I'm going to mention has come out of the other presentations as well. And so it's good that there's some confirmation in what we are discussing today. So what I'd like to do is just again highlight, as Bishop Jeff mentioned, some of the key concepts when we talk about planetary boundaries. I want to talk about what theology I think is unhelpful when we talk about the environment and within this context of planetary boundaries, what theology is unhelpful for us to talk about. Then what I think is a helpful theological approach. And then finally, some ideas of what we can do. When we talk about planetary boundaries, the first key concept that we need to talk about is this idea of the Anthropocene, that we're finding around the planet that there is mass extinction But unlike previous times, this time the extinctions are caused by human activity. And so the first part, the anthro part, refers to human beings, that human beings have become so that the impact of human activity has become so great on the planet that we can now directly link human activity to what is happening on the planet. Another concept that we need to hold on to is this idea of a carrying capacity, that each of the Earth systems has a finite level of stress that it is able to handle. Bishop Jeff mentioned some of those Earth systems that we are trying to monitor, or that we monitor when we talk about planetary boundaries. But each of those, we say, has a carrying capacity. It has a level of stress which it is able to handle. We also talk about environmental thresholds. So when we get to a certain point, the systems we are monitoring are damaged to such an extent that they can no longer be brought back once we've reached those thresholds. And Bishop Jeff showed us some examples of some of those that we think have gone beyond their threshold. And then the last concept for us to think about is this idea of a tipping point, the point at which there have been so many small changes in a system that eventually it leads to one big change in the system. It either leads to a disaster, it leads to a complete collapse of the system, but there's a tipping point, a point at which we've put so much pressure on a system that now the system itself collapses. So just some ideas I want us to hold with us, so that when we talk about the theology, we know what the concepts are that we are trying to address. One of the things in theology that I find unhelpful, and already today we've had discussion on that, is this idea of mastery theology. God gave us dominion over the earth. I think if we don't discuss this idea of mastery theology, we will give ourselves as Christians credit where we don't deserve it, because for too long, we've used this idea of mastery to say we can do whatever we want because God has given us control of the earth. We can do with the earth whatever we want. We can do with creation whatever we want because God has given us dominion. And my question is, how do we define dominion? Again, for me, what's helpful when we talk about dominion is to think about a king who has dominion over a kingdom. When a king is given dominion over a kingdom, or a king says to some of his senior officials, I'm giving you dominion over a portion of my kingdom, we don't have an understanding that the person is meant to go there and exploit. The person is meant to go there and kill. The person is meant to go there and fight. When we think about dominion in that sense, dominion means to care, dominion means to protect, dominion means to provide. And I think we need to, those of us who are involved in issues of the environment, really need to find ways of reframing this term dominion, so that we don't lose the term, but we say, actually, the way we've been using it is incorrect. There are more helpful ways in which we can think about dominion. Dominion as stewardship, dominion as creation care, dominion as a way of being God's representatives here on earth, looking after all that God has created. Another kind of theology that I find unhelpful is escapist theology. This idea that the earth exists, God will never allow anything bad to happen to us. We don't need to do anything about the environment. God is in control, and we don't need to do anything. As long as God is in control, things will happen. It's unhelpful because That kind of theology, again, means we can do whatever we want. As long as we pray and as long as we believe, we don't need to care, we don't need to consider the consequences of our actions. A third kind of theology that, especially with climate change, has been quite prominent, is this idea of blaming theology, where in theology we say, well, it's not our fault, someone else caused it. It's not our responsibility to do something about it. It's our government or our elected officials. It's not us, it's always someone else. Which again means we find a problem, we can leave it because someone else caused it or someone else needs to deal with it, and it has nothing to do with us. And then another one, or final one, that I want to highlight, that is unhelpful when we talk about our responsibility to creation, is this idea of the prosperity gospel, that God wants us to prosper at any cost. Doesn't matter what the cost is to the earth. It doesn't matter what the cost is to fellow human beings. It doesn't matter what the cost is to our communities and to our neighborhoods. God wants me to prosper. God wants me to have as much money as I can, to have as big a house as I can, to have as many possessions as I can. The will of God is for me to prosper. It's unhelpful because all of those things that we want to acquire come at a cost. Come at a cost to the earth, come at a cost to people. And somebody somewhere needs to pick up the cost of us wanting more and more. So what is a more helpful approach to thinking about this issue of the environment and about planetary boundaries? In theology, we have a brand of theology called eschatology, which talks about the end times. It tells us that as Christians, we are always waiting for the coming of Christ. We are always waiting for Jesus to come back, the second coming, if you like. Right now, in Advent, much of what we are saying in our liturgies is, "Come, Lord Jesus, come." We wait expectantly for that day to come. But eschatology also tells us that we do not know the day or the hour. So how we wait is important. We know that Christ will come again. In every generation, we say we hope that it will happen in our lifetime, but none of us knows exactly when or how it will happen. But we have this brand of theology that says Christ will come and that there will be the end of the ages as we know it. I find it helpful to talk about eschatology within the context of the environment, because so much of what we hear when we speak about planetary boundaries, when we speak about the Anthropocene, when we speak about climate change, is we only have so long and then everything will fall apart. As Christians, we don't fear the end. In fact, in our prayers, we say we look for the resurrection of the dead and the life of the world to come. We look forward to what is going to come after this. But while we wait for that to come, how we wait is important. We've spoken this morning also about creation and sin. Another helpful way to think about the environment within the context of theology is to say that God has created, and we read in Genesis 1, God created and God said it is good, that creation is good. In Genesis chapter 2, when the original sin enters the world, sin becomes the problem. And so for me, we have to look at eschatology and creation together and say, what we need to address is not that we want to stop the end from happening, but rather that we want to address the impact of sin in the world and how sin has caused that division between God and people, between human beings, and that division between people and creation. We have that story of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden, and how they, through sin, are no longer directly connected to God. They are kicked out of the Garden of Eden, and we have this infighting between these two human beings. And so this picture of sin creating the severing of the relationships that were there when God said it is good. The third key concept, theological approach that I find helpful is the idea of salvation. That throughout the Bible and throughout the history of the church, salvation is there to help us reconnect that which was broken by sin. That salvation is about reconnecting people with God, people with each other, and people with creation. And throughout both the Old and the New Testaments, there's example after example of how God offers us salvation as a way of undoing or addressing what sin brought into the world. And so for me, a helpful theological approach when we talk about this is to say, our aim is not to fear what might happen at the end, but rather to correct the broken relationships. Because if we look only, or if we speak only about fear, about what might happen, we could say, we could be the reason why no one wants to move, because fear causes us to stand still. But if we tell the story of creation and sin and the hope of salvation, there's hope for us to fix that which is broken. There's hope for us to reconnect that which has been destroyed. There's hope for us to deal with what we are talking about. So what can we do? I think in the way that we speak about creation, in the way that we speak about environmental damage, in the way that we speak about planetary boundaries, we have to find ways of speaking about connection. How are we connected to each other? Bishop Jeff said earlier, people are not disconnected from the environment or separated from creation, but we are part of creation. How do we find ways of speaking about being connected to each other, being connected to creation? How do we find ways of speaking about being connected to God? How do we find ways of speaking about being connected to animals? Like the story we just heard of the gorillas. How do we speak about our connection to creation? I think what we should also be doing is highlighting stories, biblical stories and narratives that speak about that kind of creation. I've put down a quote from Romans chapter 8 that speaks about the earth waiting for the liberation of God's people, that the earth groans like a woman in child labor, waiting for the liberation of God's people. So
I'm sorry about that, Sean. I think I must have unmuted themselves by mistake. If everybody who's not speaking can please be sure to keep your microphone muted. Sean, please do continue. Sorry for the interruption.
Okay. Then another quote that I've put down, another example is from St. Francis of Assisi in his Canticle of the Sun, when he says, "Praise be to you, my Lord, through Sister Mother Earth, who sustains us and governs us, and who produces varied fruits with colored flowers and herbs." Again, this idea of the earth being a sister to us, being a mother to us, the earth being connected to us. And then the last point is that we need to seek ways of connecting the stories of creation with the hearts of our people. And we can do that by the way that we preach about the environment, about how we highlight certain sacred songs. And we have within the Christian tradition, we have now the season of creation in September and October, where we encourage churches to speak about issues of the environment. Another thing that we can do to touch the hearts of people is to look at ways that we can connect people to nature, to take us out into the environment, especially those of us who live in cities where we are surrounded by concrete all the time, to go and experience nature and to talk about what it means to be out, to reconnect, to take our shoes off and to walk in the sand and to feel and to smell and to taste and see all that God has created. And then lastly, to talk about the historic links, because all of us have stories about our connection to the land, about what the environment looked like when we grew up, stories about our historic, maybe family or community links to the land, to nature, to the mountains, and so on. And so just a few ideas from me on how, from a Christian perspective, we can address these huge issues of planetary boundaries in a way that doesn't scare us into inaction, but rather inspires us to take action for all of creation. Thank you.
Reverend Sean, thank you so much. I'm actually reminded as you bring to us that beautiful sacredness of our interrelationships and our connection with Mother Earth. I'm reminded of the Persian poet Rumi, who said, amongst many other beautifully quotable quotes, he said, "There are many ways to kneel and kiss the ground," and that was just so resonant for me in your very beautiful presentation. Thank you so much for bringing us that reverence and reminding us of the relationships that are so important. And I'm also reminded of the African traditional philosophy of Ubuntu. And Ubuntu is not only I am because you are, but it also is about I am because of my environment. I am because of the mountains and the trees around me and the plants around me. I am because I walk this soil and I am fed by this soil. So I appreciate that so much, Sean. You've evoked so much for me. You've evoked the poet in me around nature. So thank you so much. I appreciate that enormously. I see that we are running out of time a little bit, but what I'd really like to do is we have had some indication from the chat that people would like to have discussions, but I have not seen any hands up, nor have I seen any questions in the chat. What I'd like to do very briefly before we move on to our final presenter for today is invite you to just have a look at these questions. And they're just yes, no, or somewhat questions. I'm going to launch a poll. And perhaps can you see the poll now? Can everybody see the questions?
It was just there, Barry. Do you want to put it up again?
Okay, is it gone? Okay, let me do that again.
I think I'm seeing the questions.
Okay, great. So I've got some people who are answering. Does your faith, the first question is, do you think Indigenous voices are given sufficient platform and are sufficiently heard in conversations like these of natural, of word value
So
relationships?
how do we click on it, Barry?
So it should give you an option, either yes, no, or somewhat.
I see.
And so you should be able to click on one of those. So do you think Indigenous voices are given sufficient platform and are sufficiently heard in conversations around planetary boundaries and, of course, national boundaries? And then the second question is, does your faith value relationships with other living beings and the earth? So what's interesting to me is that so far, the vast majority of people are saying no, Indigenous voices are definitely not given enough platform and are not sufficiently heard. But 92% of you are saying that your faith definitely values relationships with other living beings and the earth. That's a really interesting and very encouraging response. Thank you so much. I'm going to end that poll. I've ended that poll, and there you should be able to see the results now. You should be able to see how 70% of you said that Indigenous voices do not have enough of a platform. 15% of you felt that they do, and 15% felt somewhat. They kind of sometimes do. And then the second question, 93% of you said that your faiths do value relationships with other living beings and the earth, and 7% of you felt that that your faith does not value that. I see that there are some people who cannot see the poll, and I apologize for that. I don't know if you're perhaps on a phone that doesn't allow you easily to see that facility. And then there is one more question that I thought that I would like to ask you. You can't see the answers. Okay, let's just move on to this next question. Are concerns about biodiversity and biodiversity loss discussed, preached, taught, or prayed about and acted upon in your faith community? And the answers there would be yes, no, or somewhat. And Dr. Gladys has to leave now, so we're just saying another huge vote of thanks to her as you're busy answering those questions. Nobody has voted yet. Does that mean you can't see those questions? It tells me that you're viewing the questions. There we are. Okay, gosh. Right, we've gone back to the other questions.
No.
I'm sorry, it seems to have jumped back to the other questions. There we are. And let's just see. There we are. Now you can see. Are concerns about biodiversity and biodiversity loss discussed, preached, taught, or prayed about and acted upon in your faith community? And now I see all the answers coming through. I'll give you another few seconds because I really want to hear from Makoma very soon. And that's looking very interesting. So I am going to give you another 3 seconds. 78% of you have, 79% of you voted. Okay, so a few more people voting, and we're just watching that time. Okay, I'm going to end the polling. And I'm sharing the results, which are telling us that 54% of you feel that these questions are prayed about, taught, preached about, and acted upon in your faith community, but nearly 30% of you feel that they're not. And 23% of you feel somewhat, which is probably, yes, they're mentioned, but not enough. I find these very, very interesting and insightful statistics. And if you're one of those 29 or 30% of people who feels that these questions are not enough addressed in your faith community, I'd really like you to, first of all, speak to whoever is in your pulpits, but also as faith leaders yourselves, maybe think about what you can do about that. So there we are. The very final speaker of the day today is Makoma Lakalakala, and I'm just busy pulling up this. I want to introduce her very carefully to you because she's a very special lady. Makoma is a South African activist and is the director of the Johannesburg branch of EarthLife Africa. But her connection with SAFSI is very strong because along with Liz McDade, Makoma was awarded the 2018 Goldman Environmental Prize for the African region for their work on using the courts to stop a Russian-South African nuclear deal in 2017 that would have cost our country trillions. So that was a collaboration between SAFC and EarthLife Africa, and it was a classic David and Goliath triumph. So who better than Makoma Lekalakala to tell us how you and I can make a difference to our world and our Southern Africa, our region, in a practical and tangible way as we tackle the mighty challenges of our times as described by our speakers today. Makoma, it is an absolute delight to hand over the platform to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Reverend Berry, and good afternoon to all the participants on this call. I must say that I'm honored, particularly that this is like officially the last day of the year that I am part of this robust panel, and that also invokes spirituality in some of us. I think what I'm going to share with you today, it complements what Bishop Davis had started with this morning. He asked, what are we doing to our home? And I think this is the question that all of us are asking as to what exactly are we doing to our homes. We find ourselves at a time when major changes in how we think and live are urgently needed. We are continuously being called to step up. And are we ready to step up, or are we stepping up? And this is, I think, what we all have to ask ourselves and make a reflection. Our beliefs and faith systems are a guide to choose how, or a way that how we can revere the earth. But I have always asked myself that, and I always have observed that there's something really missing, especially when we are in pursuit of solutions. And what I think we're missing revisiting our ancient wisdoms, our cultures, and on how to counter the ecological disruptions that we're witnessing. And I'd like to thank Reverend Sean Cosett for linking this up with the faith system, or the faith beliefs that people have, that the ancient wisdoms are very important and they can provide an alternative to the kind of ecological destruction or disruption that we're facing. And one thing that is very common in all our faiths is that, or our faith stories, is that the stories of creation are connected to the environment. They are connected to the ecological balance. And all of them actually impress us, or the holy text or the teachings also emphasizes on how we as human beings have got to take care of creation and not destroy it. So that's something that's very common. But as faith leaders, and I think faith leaders have a role to play, and that role, it's the leadership that you have to play. And for me, leadership does not only speak to a title a person is given. Leadership for me, it's what you do. And what you do would be displayed by the respect you share with other people, by the service you provide, and the community that you belong in. And obviously, by the community you belong in, for me, is the community that strives for ecological balance, is the community that has a pursuit for justice. It's a community that is very honest in its actions, because you find a lot of people who are not really honest in their actions. And I think that was also deliberated when Reverend Sean Cosett spoke about the kind of religion that we find being practiced now lately, a kind of religion that is very costly, that has got externalized costs. And that's not what honesty means to us. Honesty means reverence to the earth and maintaining the ecological balance. What is important also is to act local. Let's check as to what's happening in our surroundings. What is that is not right, or that does not sound right in our surroundings? And this is where we need to start. We act locally before we can even think of going to another area to act. And I liked how we heard about the protection of the gorillas as part of the conversation. And these are some of the most important things that we can actually be involved in at the local level, protecting the indigenous plants, protecting the natural ambience of an area that you find yourself in, and not let it be destroyed by so-called development. And that has actually contributed towards the ecological imbalance and the injustices that we're facing today. There's one issue that it's on us every day. Yes, we speak about a pandemic, and the pandemic has shaken the world, but the pandemic having shaken the world, there is climate change that has been there for quite a long time. And we can learn from how people acted when the pandemic became severe. Climate change has been severe for decades now, and we don't see governments, we don't see individuals, we don't see people acting. We're still talking about it as if it's something far away when it's just near us. And these are some of the things that we really have to reflect and talk amongst ourselves if we're not complicit to the destruction of the environment. We can learn a lot from the COVID-19 pandemic, that we can all act. We can also pressurize our governments to act, but also pressurizing and also taking actions ourselves. We all are taking action by wearing masks when you go outside, by ensuring either you sanitize or you wash your hands continuously, and social balance. So these are some of the practical steps that we've taken around COVID, and these are the practical steps that we can also take around protecting the environment. These are the practical steps that we can take, making sure that we are not complicit to the destruction of our environment. With climate change, there's an agreement that has brought us closer to mitigating climate change, and the Bishop has spoken about it, and other speakers have spoken about it. That is the Paris Agreement. And this Paris Agreement, it's the 5th year anniversary. It was the 5th year anniversary on the 12th. And what that agreement entailed was that countries have got to put in what they call nationally determined contributions. The countries should declare as to what actions they would take to ensure that they mitigate against climate change, there's adaptation for people, and also that finance it's given towards technology that is going to assist in not destroying, or technology, particularly electricity generation technology, that's going to assist, or that is going to help alleviate a high concentration of greenhouse gas emissions in the atmosphere. South Africa had, in 2015, yes, agreed to the Paris Agreement. They also have included their nationally determined contributions. And in those nationally determined contributions, they had said that they would, that they would have a just transition to a low carbon development. But this was not the case. And this not being the case, we as local activists had said, this cannot go on. We have to act locally, hold our governments accountable. So what we did, we just simply reminded the minister of the Paris Agreement that they have signed. We also reminded them of the National Climate Change Response Policy. We also reminded them that they're part of negotiating the International Convention on Climate Change. And the minister and the government, they decided that they would continue authorizing coal-fired power stations, of which the interpanel governmental committee on climate change had said coal is the biggest contributor towards greenhouse gas emissions. But because we're informed, this is what I would urge you as space leaders to do, to inform yourself, get as much information as possible, educate yourself, but as you inform yourself and educate yourself, do that with people around you, with the community around you, so that taking action can be taking action collectively. it's also important to be critical, not just accept what you are given. And we've seen this because of the complexity of the representative democracy that we have in this country in particular. I'm not sure about the other countries in the Southern African region, whether they also have that representative democracy that is very problematic. Being critical would mean that in anything that you have to accept, you accept based on that this is a decision that has been taken, taking into consideration the ethics, taking into consideration that it's a just decision, taking into consideration that this is not going to harm the community or the society that we live in. But if that's the case, I think you have all the powers that we can have through a lot of regional bodies and including your organization. And I think as faith communities, you are much more stronger than some of the organization that you can actually request meetings with the ministers. You can put the human stories to them and indicate how their non-activity or their non-action is it's impacting on ordinary people and impacting on the environment. And when we took the government to court over the authorization of a coal-fired power station, it was because we are concerned about the air we breathe. We need to breathe clean air. We are concerned that we don't actually want to see any water being polluted. And we are concerned about climate change that is ravaging people all over the world. And after 5 years of a battle between us and the South African government, we had won what is called the climate change impact assessment case that is going to assist even people within the region, within the continent and the world, whenever they are challenging coal-fired power stations or they are challenging any project that they think is going to add to carbon emissions in the atmosphere. But then I have a real problem in that as ordinary people, and that's the challenge that we always give, and we hope that through the Southern Faith Communities Environmental Institute, this would be one of the things that would also try and look at, that most of faith leaders or the so-called formalized faith leaders in different churches, in different mosques and religious places, you find them as if they are divorced from the communities that they are in. I've been part of what is called environmental impact assessment in an area of Vembe in Limpopo, and this is the majestical Limpopo Valley. And in this majestical Limpopo Valley, we learned that there's an 8,000 hectares that is going to be destroyed. And this 8,000 hectares is full of vegetation, it's full of sacred places, it's full of sacred rivers and sacred sites. And in this area, this is where a special economic zone is being proposed. And when we go to the environmental impact assessment, the processes that would lead to the construction or the development of this special economic zone, we find that religious leaders are not there. We find that even when we reach out to them, they're not responsive. And this is one of the issues that I think I'm challenging you on today, and I would want to see more of you being involved at that local level, at ensuring that nature is not being destroyed. Don't come in just for you to come and officiate and open the meetings with prayer. You have to act. Your reverence to earth, your ethics, your belief system that connects to nature have got to be at play, and not just come in and pray and then just move out of the hall and come in when we have to close the session. I don't think that's leadership, and this is what we're challenging you on. If the Musina Mercado Special Economic Zone gets authorized by this government, I, for one, would say we reached out to faith leaders. We reached out to different faith leaders from Christian, from Islam, Buddhists, to African traditionalists who, at least because of the sacred sites that are very close to them, are coming on board, but the others are not. So it's something that we really need to find way on how we deal with it. And I think information is always there. SAFSE has got information, different organizations have got information. And this is something that we really have to make sure that we don't let it happen on our watch and on the ground where we have our own constituencies or our places of worship. But I want to close my my talk now. I know it has been very short, with a way forward from the Earth Charter. The Earth Charter, or what we call about the reverence of the earth. It says, let ours be a time remembered for the awakening of a new reverence for life. The firm resolve to achieve sustainability, the quickening of the struggle for justice, peace, and the joyful creation. And that's from the Earth Charter on the way forward. I thank you, and I hope that would all of us quicken struggle for justice, peace, and joyful creation. Thank you.
Makoma, wow, thank you so much. And thank you for that very powerful call to active leadership of the faith leaders. Yeah, we cannot actually afford to say one thing and do another. We really have to step up and be counted. And that is what we are all called to do at this time. I really appreciate also your encouragement to us to look at what is happening locally around us, and how important that is for us. Who has started screen sharing now? I don't think we don't have any more speakers, but Makoma, thank you so much for what you have brought to us. Thank you also to our Islamic participants who've been sharing Quranic scriptures in the chat with us, and that's been really edifying and really wonderful as well, to be able to do that, to have that shared with us. We are running a little bit over time, so before we have our closing prayer, I'm going to simply quickly share my screen because I need to show you our draft resolution that comes from our Johannesburg conference. And I can't share a screen while somebody else is sharing a screen. So Mariam, could you stop trying to share your screen, please? There we are. Okay, I'm not going to share it as a slide, or maybe I can, but I don't want the slide to go. I just want the slide to stay still. And basically this is we're going to vote on this. And what it says, this is our resolution that came out of the Johannesburg conference that was part of our policy conference in Johannesburg last year. My question to you is, does this hold true for your faith, or does it need to be changed? Is this something that your faith can agree with? Planetary boundaries and biodiversity loss. Human actions are responsible for the mass extinction happening within the biodiversity of the web of life. We call on our governments to uphold and strengthen their commitments to international agreements regarding biodiversity and adhere to national level conservation targets. We commit to learning more and raising awareness about biodiversity loss and planetary boundaries within our faith communities and the general public. We also commit to the underlying principles of listening and being inclusive of Indigenous knowledge and appropriate methods of engagement. So I'm going to share a poll with you now. And I'm going to ask you simply to indicate yes, no, or somewhat. Do you agree with that draft resolution? Yes. Do you not agree with it? In which case, no. Do you think that it needs some work, in which case somewhat? You part agree and part don't agree. So I see that the voting is coming in. Thank you to those of you who are answering that question. I'm going to give you a few more seconds. I apologize for the fact that we have gone a little bit over time, but we will be just a few minutes more. We're going to close in prayer just as soon as we're done with the polling. I'm very curious, those of you who are voting somewhat, please would you just put your reservations in the chat or suggestions about how that should be tweaked, that statement. Whatever suggestions you have would be most welcome, and I will take them back to our management for discussion. All right, so I'm going to end the polling now. 91% of you have said yes. I'm going to share the results. 94% of you, have said yes. You fully agree with that statement and it reflects your faith. 9% of you, that's 3 people, have indicated that they have some kind of reservation or thought around how it could be improved. I really hope that you will share that in the chat. So my friends and colleagues, thank you so much for joining us today. I am going to ask Marilyn Chitharai. Thank you, Nick Payton, for saying that 103% you agree with it. Marilyn Chitharai is from Durban, and she is she's from Religions for Peace. And here in South Africa, she is involved in a lot of interfaith youth, climate, and media programs. She's going to be doing a very brief Earth meditation with us today to help us connect to Mother Earth. And what a fitting and beautiful way to end our 2020 regional interfaith dialogues. Thank you so much to everyone who has participated. Marilyn, it is over to you.
Hi, everybody. Thank you, Reverend Berry. Thank you for the inspirational program today. I just want to apologize in advance. There's construction happening outside my house. So I hope it's not a big disturbance to everybody while we do this meditation. Okay, so let us begin. So this meditation is actually given to me by my guru, Paramahamsa Vishwananda. And you can do it every day. You can do it 1 minute to 5 minutes, but it's very powerful and it helps you to connect to the earth. But at the same time, it helps to send positive love, energy, and vibrations to the earth. So to begin, I want all of y'all to place your hands in front of you like this, but now bring it to your heart level and place it in front of your chest, right? So your hands are facing, your palms are inwards. And then you're bringing it to your heart level to face it, to put it in front of your chest, right? So now I want you to close your eyes. So close your eyes and take a deep breath in and a deep breath out. In, out. Take another deep breath in and a deep breath out. And as you take your next deep breath in and out, I want you to release all the negative energy you feel, your fears, your worries, everything that's troubling you. So take a deep breath in and take a deep breath out. Now, I want you to focus on your heart center. And I want you to feel your heart and feel your heart expanding and expanding and expanding. And feel all the love and all the positive energy in your heart. So just focus on it for a few seconds. Now this bright light that you see in your heart, I want you to take it to the middle of your forehead. And see this light expanding and let it purify your mind. Bring this love and light to your eyes and let it purify your eyes, your sight. Bring it to your nose and let it purify your breathing. Bring it to your ears and let it purify your hearing. Bring it to your mouth and let it purify your speech. Now bring this love and light to your hands and let it purify all your actions. Bring it to your leg and feet and let it purify your path to always bring you to the right path. Now bring this love and light back to your heart center and just feel your heart. Feel it expanding and expanding and expanding. Now in between your palms, visualize Mother Earth and send all this love and all this light and all this positive energy to Mother Earth. Now visualize your country, your hometown. Send all this love and positive energy to it. Send it to the president, send it to the polices, send it to all the people that are currently suffering during this pandemic as well. Send it to all the doctors and all the people in the hospitals. Just send them all your love and all your positive energy. Now think of your family and friends, your loved ones, those close to you. Send it to your mom, your dad, your brother, sister, to all the people that are currently suffering right now, to anyone that you know that needs healing and love. To send all this love and positive energy to them. Now visualize Mother Earth again. Send all this love and all this positive energy to the plants, the trees. Send it to the animals that are currently suffering. And offer Mother Earth all your love and gratitude. Tell her thank you. Thank her for the food we eat, the water we drink, the air we breathe, everything that she does for us. Just offer all your love and positive energy and feel your heart expanding. Now bring this love and light back to your heart center and see it expanding and keep it with you always, wherever you go and whatever you do. See that you are an instrument of the divine and that you are here to spread this love and light to the rest of the world. Om Shanti 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 Shri Gurubhyo Namaha Hari Om. Okay. You can open your eyes now. Thank you so much. So this is an earth meditation that was given to me by my guru, Paramamsa Viswananda, and you can do it every day, even for a minute to 5 minutes, and it creates a good positive energy and vibrations. It also makes you internally strong as well to do what you need to do every day. So thank you so much.
Marilyn, thank you so much. What a beautiful way to end our regional interfaith dialogue. What a beautiful way to end the series of regional interfaith dialogues. And what a beautiful way to take us into the holiday season. If you are Jewish, you will be celebrating Hanukkah at this time. If you are Christian, you are heading into the Christmas period. If you are Wiccan or follow any of the other earth-based traditions, then you will be heading towards the festival of Litha, which is the summer solstice here in the southern hemisphere. But whoever you are, whatever you believe and whatever you are doing, you share this earth, this one planet that we all call home. And it is so beautiful that we are able to connect at this level and take this love and this light out with us wherever we go. Thank you, everybody, for your participation. A wonderful audience, wonderful presenters. We are all blessed by each other, and may we continue to be so. Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you. We thank you very
Thank
much
you,
for wonderful
Apostle.
presentation.
Thank you so much for the contribution.
Thank you from Malawi. Thank you.